The biggest mistakes are often made when people believe they already know the truth. On a quiet evening outside Washington, D.C., one officer believed he was investigating a simple situation. He had no idea that the woman standing in front of him represented the very system of justice he claimed to protect. The neighborhood was calm, the streets were quiet, and the soft glow of garage lights filled the driveways of a peaceful suburban community. After a long day of meetings and legal discussions, Danielle Brooks returned home, hoping for nothing more than a quiet evening away from the demands of her career. To her neighbors, she was simply a woman coming home after work. She carried a briefcase, checked her phone, and walked toward her private garage like anyone else would. But Danielle Brooks was not just anyone. Behind her calm expression was a lifetime dedicated to law, fairness, and public service. As a senior Department of Justice official, she had spent years working within the legal system, studying the importance of evidence, patience, and equal treatment. Yet on this evening, she was not thinking about her position. She was not thinking about her title. She was simply Danielle, a person returning home. A few minutes later, Officer Ethan Carter arrived in the neighborhood after receiving a report that required his attention. Ethan had built his career around being alert and responding quickly. He believed his badge represented responsibility, protection, and the trust of the community. Like many officers, he believed that confidence was necessary when facing uncertain situations. But sometimes the most important test of judgment comes when the complete story is not visible. As Ethan approached the garage area, he saw a black woman standing near the entrance of the property. He did not know her background. He did not know her career. He did not know the years of service behind the person standing before him. He only knew what he saw in that moment. And that was where the real story began. Danielle noticed the change in the atmosphere immediately. She understood that the situation was moving in an unexpected direction, but she remained calm. She had spent years inside courtrooms and government offices where emotions could easily influence decisions. She knew that patience often revealed more than arguments ever could. Instead of immediately mentioning her position, she chose to observe. She wanted to understand the moment before changing it. Because Danielle knew something important. A person's true character was often revealed when they believed nobody important was watching. Ethan believed he was simply doing his job. Danielle knew that every interaction carried a lesson. The quiet neighborhood continued around them. Porch lights remained on. Cars passed in the distance. The ordinary evening continued for everyone else. But in that driveway, a moment was unfolding that would soon challenge assumptions, question authority, and reveal a truth neither person expected. One person carried the visible power of a badge. The other carried the invisible power of knowledge, experience, and justice. And before the night was over, everyone would discover that the person who seemed to have the least power was actually the person who understood power the most. The most revealing moments in life are often the ones when people believe they already understand what they are seeing. In the quiet neighborhood outside Washington, D.C., Officer Ethan Carter continued the conversation with Danielle Brooks, unaware that the person standing in front of him carried a responsibility far beyond what appeared on the surface. Ethan believed he was handling a situation that required attention and professionalism. His training had taught him the importance of being aware, making decisions, and maintaining control when circumstances were unclear. He took pride in his role because he believed the badge represented service to the community. But every badge carries a responsibility that goes beyond authority. It requires the ability to recognize the person behind the situation. Danielle remained composed as the conversation continued. She did not react with anger. She did not immediately reveal her position. Instead, she listened carefully and watched the way the interaction developed. Years of working in the legal system had taught her that the first reaction of a person often revealed more than their final words. She had seen how quickly assumptions could influence decisions. She had seen how important it was to gather facts before reaching conclusions. Those lessons guided her that evening. To Danielle, this was not only about herself. It was about a larger question. How do people treat someone when they do not know their background, achievements, or influence? Ethan did not know that Danielle had spent years helping shape decisions within the Department of Justice. He did not know that she had dedicated her career to protecting principles of fairness and accountability. He only saw the circumstances in front of him, and that was exactly what made the moment meaningful. Danielle understood that revealing her title would instantly change the atmosphere. People often respond differently when they discover someone has importance. Voices become more careful. Attitudes become more respectful. But Danielle believed something deeper mattered. Respect should exist before recognition. It should not depend on a person's position, career, or reputation. The true measure of character appeared when people believed they were interacting with someone ordinary. As the evening continued, small details around the neighborhood began to create a bigger picture. A nearby resident noticed the interaction from a distance. Another person quietly looked outside after hearing the conversation. The peaceful surroundings remained unchanged, but attention slowly gathered around the driveway. Nobody knew the full story yet. Nobody knew the years of experience carried by the woman standing there. Nobody knew that the person being questioned was connected to the highest levels of federal justice. Ethan continued believing he was simply doing his duty. Danielle continued believing that patience could reveal important truths. The difference between them was not only their positions. It was their understanding of power. Ethan carried visible authority through his uniform. Danielle carried invisible authority through her knowledge, experience, and commitment to justice. One person had a badge. The other person understood the meaning behind the law itself. And as the night moved forward, the situation began becoming something neither of them expected. Because sometimes the most important lessons begin when one person believes they are judging the moment, only to discover that the moment is revealing them. The most important truths are often hidden beneath the surface of ordinary moments. In the quiet neighborhood outside Washington, D.C., the interaction between Officer Ethan Carter and Danielle Brooks continued, but neither person fully understood how much the evening was revealing about judgment, responsibility, and the meaning of fairness. Ethan remained focused on the situation in front of him. He believed he was following his training and carrying out his responsibility as an officer. To him, the badge represented years of dedication, discipline, and commitment to serving the public. He believed that people depended on officers to recognize problems and respond when something seemed unusual. But there was another side of authority that could not be learned from a uniform or a handbook. True authority required understanding the people affected by every decision. Danielle Brooks understood that better than most. Her career within the Department of Justice had exposed her to countless situations where first impressions were incomplete. She had seen cases where assumptions created confusion and where patience revealed the facts that others missed. She knew that a person's appearance could never tell the full story of their life. That belief shaped the way she approached every difficult moment. She did not see the encounter as a battle between herself and Ethan. She saw it as an opportunity to understand something deeper about human behavior. Danielle knew that revealing her position would instantly change everything. The moment Ethan discovered who she was, the conversation would no longer be about the circumstances that brought them together. It would become about her title, her influence, and her place within the federal justice system. But Danielle believed that true respect should not appear only after someone's importance becomes known. Respect should exist before the introduction. It should exist before the achievements are discovered. Ethan continued to view the moment through the information available to him. He did not know that Danielle had spent years working alongside legal professionals, government officials, and communities across the country. He did not know that the woman standing calmly in her own garage understood the law at a level most people never experience. He only saw what was immediately visible, and that was the very lesson hidden inside the moment. Around the neighborhood, the quiet evening continued. A few homes had their lights on. Cars moved slowly through nearby streets. The ordinary rhythm of life continued while an extraordinary lesson was unfolding. A neighbor watching from a window noticed the calm behavior of Danielle. Another noticed that the conversation was becoming more serious than expected. Small observations began forming a larger picture. Meanwhile, a home security camera captured the events from above. It recorded without assumptions or opinions. It simply preserved what happened. At that moment, nobody realized how important those recordings could become. They were just another part of everyday life. But truth often survives through the details that people overlook. Ethan carried visible authority through his uniform. Danielle carried hidden authority through her knowledge and experience. One represented the power to enforce rules. The other represented the responsibility behind those rules. Neither of them knew that the night would soon reveal a lesson neither could forget. Because sometimes the person being judged is actually the person who understands justice the most. The most powerful moments are often the ones when the truth is quietly being recorded before anyone realizes its importance. Outside the Washington, D.C. home where Danielle Brooks lived, the evening continued with a calm appearance, but beneath that calm was a deeper lesson about perception, responsibility, and the difference between having authority and understanding it. Officer Ethan Carter remained focused on the situation as he saw it. He believed he was doing what his position required. His years in law enforcement had taught him the importance of awareness, confidence, and making decisions when information was limited. He respected the badge he wore because he believed it represented service and protection. But every person who carries authority eventually faces a moment when following procedure is not enough. They must also understand the people standing in front of them. Danielle remained patient because she understood that moments like this could reveal more than words ever could. Throughout her career with the Department of Justice, she had witnessed how quickly people could form conclusions without knowing the complete story. She had worked with laws, evidence, and decisions that affected real lives. Those experiences taught her that fairness required more than simply knowing the rules. It required understanding the human beings behind every situation. She continued to avoid mentioning her position because she wanted the moment to remain honest. She did not want recognition to change the way she was treated. She wanted to know how people responded before they knew her title. Danielle understood that a person's true character often appeared when there was nothing to gain from showing respect. Ethan noticed that Danielle's reaction was different from what he expected. She was not trying to create conflict. She was not attempting to use influence. She simply remained composed and allowed the situation to unfold. That calmness created a moment of reflection, even though Ethan did not fully understand why. He was looking at a person in a garage. He was not seeing the years of legal experience, public service, and dedication behind that person. Around the neighborhood, the quiet signs of curiosity continued. A neighbor briefly looked outside. Another resident noticed the unusual interaction from a distance. Nobody had the complete picture, but small details were beginning to connect. Above the driveway, a security camera continued capturing everything. It recorded the conversation, the movements, and the choices made by everyone involved. The camera did not know anyone's title. It did not recognize a badge or a government position. It simply preserved the truth of the moment. At the time, nobody understood that this recording would later become one of the most important parts of the story. Ethan believed he was evaluating a situation. Danielle understood that the situation was also revealing something about everyone involved. One person carried visible authority through a uniform. The other carried hidden authority through knowledge and experience. One relied on what could be seen. The other understood what could not be seen immediately. The night remained quiet, but the meaning behind the encounter continued growing. Because sometimes the most important evidence is not created during dramatic moments. Sometimes it is created during ordinary moments when people reveal who they truly are. The truth behind a moment is not always discovered while it is happening. Sometimes it takes time, evidence, and reflection before people understand the full meaning of what they witnessed. Outside Danielle Brooks's home in a quiet Washington, D.C. neighborhood, the evening continued to unfold while the most important details were already being captured. Officer Ethan Carter remained focused on the situation in front of him. He believed he was simply carrying out his responsibility as an officer. He had spent years building a career around awareness, discipline, and service. To Ethan, the badge represented trust. It represented the expectation that he would respond when something seemed unusual. But every position of authority comes with a deeper challenge. The ability to make decisions must always be balanced with the ability to understand. Danielle Brooks continued to remain calm because she understood how quickly situations could change when people only saw one part of the story. Her years with the Department of Justice had taught her that the first version of events was rarely the complete version. She had reviewed complex cases, studied evidence, and worked with people from every background. She knew that fairness depended on patience and careful observation. That was why she chose not to immediately reveal her identity. She understood that a title could change the way people behaved. Once someone discovered she was a senior federal official, the interaction would no longer reveal genuine reactions. It would become influenced by recognition and status. Danielle wanted the truth of the moment, not a response shaped by her position. Ethan noticed that Danielle's approach was unusual. Many people reacted differently when they felt questioned or misunderstood. Some became defensive. Others tried to quickly explain why they should be treated differently. Danielle did neither. She simply remained composed and allowed the situation to continue. That calmness made the moment more difficult for Ethan to categorize. He expected a simple explanation. Instead, he encountered someone who seemed completely comfortable with letting the truth speak for itself. Nearby, the neighborhood remained peaceful. The soft sound of evening traffic continued. Porch lights illuminated quiet streets. Residents continued their normal routines while an important lesson was unfolding only a few feet away. A neighbor's security system continued recording from its fixed position, capturing the entire interaction without emotion or judgment. The camera did not know Danielle's career. It did not understand Ethan's intentions. It simply recorded what happened. Those details would later become important because truth does not depend on assumptions. It depends on what actually occurred. As the minutes passed, the contrast between the two individuals became clearer. Ethan represented visible authority. His uniform immediately communicated his role. Danielle represented hidden authority. Her experience and knowledge were not visible from the outside. Yet both were connected by the same idea, responsibility. The difference was how each person understood it. Ethan saw responsibility as taking control of an uncertain situation. Danielle saw responsibility as understanding the impact of every action. Neither of them knew that the events of this evening would soon be examined more closely. Neither knew that the quiet recordings from this ordinary neighborhood would reveal a story far bigger than anyone expected. Because sometimes the most important moments in life are the ones where people believe they are simply doing their job. Those are the moments when character is revealed, when assumptions are challenged, and when the truth finally has a chance to speak. The truth often becomes clear when the smallest details begin to connect. Outside Danielle Brooks's home in the quiet Washington, D.C. neighborhood, the evening continued, but the meaning of the encounter was slowly changing. Officer Ethan Carter still believed he was managing a situation that required his attention. He believed he was acting within his role and following the responsibilities that came with his badge. But what he did not realize was that every moment was creating a record of something much larger than the situation itself. Ethan had always viewed his position through the idea of service. He believed being an officer meant protecting people, responding to uncertainty, and making decisions when others needed guidance. Those beliefs were important to him because they represented the reason he chose the profession in the first place. Yet authority carried another responsibility that was harder to measure. It required the ability to recognize when a person in front of you was more than the circumstances surrounding them. Danielle Brooks understood this because her entire career had been built around understanding complex situations. Working within the Department of Justice had shown her that truth was rarely found in the first impression. She had seen how incomplete information could influence decisions and how important it was to look deeper before reaching conclusions. That experience allowed her to remain calm even when the situation became uncomfortable. She was not focused on proving who she was. She was focused on understanding what was happening. Danielle knew that revealing her identity would immediately change the interaction. The moment Ethan learned she was a federal official, the conversation would no longer represent a normal encounter. It would become shaped by her position rather than the way she was treated before anyone knew her background. For Danielle, that distinction mattered. She believed respect was most meaningful when it was given without expectation of recognition. Ethan began noticing that something about Danielle's response was different. She did not react with the frustration he expected. She did not attempt to use influence. She did not turn the situation into a discussion about status. Instead, she remained patient and allowed the facts to develop naturally. That patience created a moment of reflection. Ethan was used to evaluating situations quickly, but Danielle's calm presence encouraged a different kind of thinking. Around the neighborhood, the details of the evening continued to be preserved. The nearby security camera remained focused on the driveway. It captured the conversation exactly as it happened. It recorded the expressions, the timing, and the choices made by both individuals. It did not interpret. It did not judge. It simply preserved the truth. At that moment, nobody understood the importance of what had been recorded. To everyone watching, it was just another evening in a quiet community. But important moments are not always recognized while they happen. Sometimes their significance appears later, when people finally see the complete picture. Ethan carried the visible authority of a badge. Danielle carried the hidden authority of experience and knowledge. One represented the ability to enforce rules. The other represented the understanding behind those rules. The difference between them was not about who had power. It was about who understood the purpose of power. And as the night continued, the truth waiting to be discovered became impossible to ignore. The moment before the truth is revealed is often the moment when people finally begin to question what they thought they understood. Outside Danielle Brooks's home in the Washington, D.C. area, the evening continued quietly, but the meaning behind the encounter between her and Officer Ethan Carter was becoming more significant with every passing minute. Ethan still believed he was handling a situation that required his professional attention. He believed his decisions were based on what he knew at that moment. But as the night unfolded, it became clear that the information he did not know was just as important as the information he had. Ethan had always respected the responsibility that came with wearing a badge. He believed officers were expected to make decisions, respond to uncertainty, and protect the communities they served. That belief was part of what motivated him to choose a career in law enforcement. However, every person who carries authority eventually faces a moment when the meaning of that authority is tested. It is not tested by how quickly they can respond. It is tested by how carefully they can understand. Danielle Brooks remained calm because she understood the importance of patience. Throughout her years with the Department of Justice, she had encountered countless situations where people wanted immediate answers. She had learned that the first version of a story was rarely the complete version. Facts required attention. People required understanding. Justice required both. She knew that revealing her position would immediately change the atmosphere. The moment Ethan discovered she was a senior federal official, the interaction would become different. People might suddenly focus on her title instead of the way the situation developed. Danielle did not want respect because of her position. She believed respect mattered most when it was given before anyone knew a person's importance. Ethan began noticing that Danielle's calmness was changing the way he viewed the encounter. She was not reacting the way he expected. She was not trying to control the conversation. She was not attempting to gain an advantage by explaining who she was. Instead, she allowed the moment to continue naturally. That choice created a quiet but powerful contrast between them. Ethan was focused on the visible details. Danielle understood the deeper ones. Around the neighborhood, more people became aware that something unusual was happening. A nearby resident looked through a window. Another person noticed the interaction from a distance. Nobody had the full story, but everyone could sense that the situation was more complicated than it first appeared. The security camera above the driveway continued recording, captured every detail without assumptions. It recorded the words, the timing, and the behavior of everyone involved. The camera did not know Danielle's title. It did not know Ethan's intentions. It simply preserved the truth. Later, those details would matter because facts do not depend on appearances. They depend on what actually happened. Ethan carried the authority people could immediately see. Danielle carried the authority people could only understand after learning her story. One had the symbol of power. The other had the knowledge behind it. Neither person knew exactly how the night would end, but the balance of understanding was already beginning to shift. Because sometimes the person who appears to be facing judgment is actually the person who reveals the meaning of justice itself. The truth does not always arrive with a dramatic announcement. Sometimes it appears quietly, through evidence, reflection, and the realization that a person was never who others assumed they were. Outside Danielle Brooks's home in the Washington, D.C. area, the evening was approaching a moment that would change the way everyone understood what happened. Officer Ethan Carter still believed he was simply completing his responsibility, but the details surrounding the encounter were beginning to create a much larger picture. Ethan had always believed that authority meant being prepared to respond when situations were uncertain. He respected his role and the expectations that came with it. The badge on his uniform represented service, commitment, and the trust of the community. But this night was revealing an important lesson. Authority was not measured only by the ability to make decisions. It was measured by the ability to understand the people affected by those decisions. Danielle Brooks had spent years learning that lesson through her work with the Department of Justice. She understood that every situation contained details that were not immediately visible. She knew that assumptions could create mistakes, and that patience often revealed information that rushed judgment could miss. That understanding allowed her to remain calm throughout the encounter. She was not focused on proving her importance. She was focused on observing the moment and allowing the truth to develop naturally. Ethan began noticing that Danielle's behavior did not match the assumptions he may have formed at the beginning. She was not demanding special treatment. She was not trying to use influence. She was simply standing with the same confidence she carried every day. That confidence came from knowing who she was, not from needing others to recognize it. The difference between them became clearer. Ethan relied on what he could immediately see. Danielle understood the importance of what could not be seen right away. Around the neighborhood, the quiet evening continued. The lights from nearby homes remained on. The streets stayed peaceful. Yet the small details of the encounter were creating a story that would soon reach beyond that driveway. The security camera continued capturing everything. It preserved the moment exactly as it happened, without assumptions or opinions. It recorded the conversation, the timing, and the choices made by both individuals. It became a silent witness to the truth. At the time, nobody knew how important that recording would become. It was simply another piece of technology in an ordinary neighborhood. But history often depends on ordinary things that preserve extraordinary moments. As the night continued, Ethan began facing a reality he had not expected. The person he thought he understood was someone whose entire career had been dedicated to understanding justice itself. Danielle never needed to announce her position to demonstrate her character. Her patience already showed the values she represented. The visible difference between them was simple. One person wore a badge. The other carried the experience of someone who had spent years protecting the principles behind the law. And as the truth moved closer to being revealed, the meaning of the entire encounter began to change. Because sometimes the greatest lesson comes when people discover that the person they underestimated was the person who understood the situation the most. The truth that changes everything is not always the truth people expect to discover. As the night continued in the quiet Washington, D.C. neighborhood, the meaning behind the encounter between Officer Ethan Carter and Danielle Brooks finally began to come into focus. What appeared to be an ordinary moment had revealed something much deeper about judgment, responsibility, and the importance of treating every person with dignity before knowing their story. Ethan eventually learned the identity of the woman standing in that driveway. He discovered that Danielle Brooks was not simply a homeowner involved in an unexpected situation. She was a senior Department of Justice official whose career had been dedicated to the principles of fairness, accountability, and the protection of the law. The discovery changed the way he viewed the entire evening. But the most important lesson was not that Danielle held an important position. The most important lesson was that she deserved respect before anyone knew her position at all. Danielle never wanted her title to become the reason people listened. She believed that every person should be treated with the same level of dignity, whether they were recognized or completely unknown. Her decision to remain calm was not a sign of weakness. It was a demonstration of confidence built through years of experience. She understood that true authority did not need to announce itself. It appeared through patience, fairness, and the ability to remain respectful during difficult moments. The security camera footage from the driveway provided a clear record of what happened that evening. It captured the details that emotions and assumptions could easily overlook. It showed the importance of looking at facts instead of relying only on first impressions. The recording became a reminder that truth does not depend on who tells the story. It depends on what actually happened. For Ethan, the experience became a moment of reflection. He had entered the situation believing he understood the circumstances, but he left understanding that every person he encountered had a story beyond what he could immediately see. The badge he wore gave him responsibility, but it also required humility. Being an officer was not only about responding to situations. It was about understanding the people involved in them. Danielle did not seek revenge. She did not want the moment to become about embarrassment or punishment. She wanted it to become a lesson about growth and awareness. She understood that meaningful change came when people had the opportunity to recognize their mistakes and become better because of them. The neighborhood eventually returned to its normal rhythm. The driveway became quiet again. The streets continued as they always had. But the lesson from that evening remained. It reminded people that appearances could never reveal the full truth of someone's life. It reminded people that a badge represented responsibility, not superiority. It reminded people that justice was not only found in courtrooms and government buildings. It was found in everyday choices and everyday interactions. Ethan began the night believing he was evaluating someone else. By the end, he realized the moment had also been evaluating him. Danielle entered her home as a private citizen and left behind a lesson about the meaning of true justice. Because the strongest form of power is not the ability to control others. It is the ability to treat others with respect, especially when nobody knows who they are.